Catch my screen. Everybody should see that now.
Yes, you are.
Can you hear me? Yep, I can hear you just fine. So, okay, well, welcome everybody to our July DALiM tips and tricks. Today, Brennan Webb, support engineer, has been with us for about a year and a half now. Is going to kind of go through some of the ES API stuff. First, a little housekeeping for GoToWebinar. If you could, if you look at the options on your top left of your viewer, you can see you can change to your zoom percentage or go full screen on it so you can see the presentation a little bit better. For Q&A, if you could just type any questions into the panel for GoToWebinar. That way, at the end of the webinar, we'll actually answer those questions. Or if it's something that's pertinent to what Brendan's discussing, I may interrupt him and go ahead and ask the question at that time as well. But if you put those in there, we'll make sure to cover them. If we don't get to all the questions, we will follow up with emails personally to anyone who submits them. And so again, so what Brennan's going to be going through is kind of just a practical application of the ES and Dialog Engine APIs. He kind of went and built kind of a mock e-commerce site. He's going to show us just how we make some of the calls, authentication, calling up images, calling the Dialog Engine itself. So hopefully it kind of gives just some ideas of what can be done with the API and the SDK kit that DALiM provides for it, and how maybe that can help you in your applications, things you need if you're running ES and you want to make more use of it. I believe everything as we shown today would actually be covered by the API option itself. So it is a separate option for ES. Some of you have that, some of you don't. But it can be purchased and added onto any ES system. And it includes both the traditional API that comes with the module and the new SQL-based API. It's all the same option, so I think you'll show maybe a little bit of that as well. And for Dialog Engine, basically Dialog Engine is only accessible through the API and the SDK. So basically if you have Dialog Engine, this is how you need to access it with either your code or, basically mimics a little bit of how ES accesses it as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass on presenter to Brennan. Let him take control. So Brennan, you should see something to accept that and start sharing out your screen. I should mention as well on the, we will be recording this and sending out a link to everybody for this. On last month's webinar, I think Mike did a webinar while I was going on user actions in ES. That video got corrupted, unfortunately, so I unfortunately don't have a copy of that. But obviously Mike keeps most of his stuff, so if you are interested in any of the stuff he covered, or if you missed it, he could send you some samples or some of his workflows and stuff and show you how those are handled. On that, Brennan, why don't you go ahead and take it.
All right. Again, guys, I'm Brennan Webb with Blanchard Systems, and as Fred was saying, I'm going to demonstrate the ES API. It's a tool that can be used to rapidly develop applications, integrate ES into other systems, and extend the functionality of your workflows. It's important to note, like Fred was saying, actually I think you already covered this, that it has its own app license, it's its own application, and requires ES core system on the back end. Diving into my presentation, after discussing some API fundamentals, I'll show us 3 applications. First, we'll search an image catalog to return information about files such as ID, display name, and class. Then we'll talk about the lightweight approval client for those customers that find ES interface too complex or busy. Last, as you can see over here in this browser, some of y'all might recognize it, my design template. We'll be using ES as a lightweight DAM with a custom storefront. As we build upon our knowledge, we'll return to this later on. For this webinar today, using a lockdown user called Webinar, I created 3 customers within our ES system and configured files with custom metadata and approval information. The customers I have are Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Each customer has 4 jobs listed under it so to organize their images and which ones they want to sell. There's pants, polo, shirt, and shorts. If you look at one of these files individually, it'll come up. This is the information that we're trying to access from the API, along with custom metadata that I made. Color is black, seller is alpha, and style is pants. As we can see in my example, alpha actually represents the customer and pants represents the job, but for organization purposes of this webinar, I decided to include it like this. Moving on to our fundamental section, this is an example ES. Call and request form. You may find this a bit intimidating, but keep in mind we can build a custom front end to display the information in whichever manner or organization is most efficient for your purposes. The API allows the creation of a front end for the system user call and response format. Using the API, the sample request form allows user to get ES data using tools called methods. In this example, we have three methods: admin login, document.get, and admin logout. Admin login and admin logout handle the authentication to the system, while the document.get gets information about a file. For this document.get, it requires parameters, and we are providing it with this one. If we submit the post, it returns information about this document. For example, we can see that the name of that document, ID 15382, is Pants Black Alpha. There's a lot of other information that's returned with this, as well as information saying we were logged in, create user, job information, class, and even the approval information. As we scroll down, we also see tabs of metadata and stuff like that, as well as EXIF info, application, and anything you want to inject in your file, Dublin core, and even some Photoshop information. For our purposes today, I've made a custom tab field called Webinar. In Webinar, we can again see those same, sorry guys, I clicked the wrong button. We can see that same information. Style is pants, color is black, and seller is alpha. This information is used to search things, as in our next example. For this method, we're using production.search. Production.search executes a Lucene search to retrieve objects from ES. Again, we're using the same admin login, logout, but the params in the production.search are a little bit different here. We're querying for everything this user has access to, as ES user permissions extend to the API. For our example, we want to only return customers and jobs. So we have used these params, accept customers set to true, and accept jobs set to true, while suppressing the page order information. Up top, what we're talking about with ES permissions, we have different ways of locking us down. As I mentioned earlier, I had a webinar user as well as the admin user. This line here is actually the admin's password and login, and this is the webinar login. As we'll see our differences, the admin user is not commented out, so posting for customer and jobs. We can see that we were successfully logged out, and we can also see all the customer information and all the jobs that the admin user has access to, where there are quite a lot. If we scroll on down, though, we can actually see the jobs that our webinar user had access to, pants, shorts, and all those other ones, as well as confirmation that we were successfully logged out. If we scroll back up and use the other user, webinar, which again I've locked down to those three customers, we can see a different story. We have three customers, alpha, gamma, and beta, as we're supposed to, and the 16 jobs that come along with them. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say about this.
I should mention that the GUI that Brendan's using here to show this is actually a GUI that DALiM's created for testing the API and what it returns. It's available in some web code that we can provide to you. It's also available on their API demo site, where you can kind of just do queries, run tests, and kind of get used to how it works hitting an actual ES server. Sorry, Brendan.
That's okay. Thank you for that clarification. Next, okay, wait, I lost my place. Next, we'll look at another production.search method. Here, instead of searching for a global, we're going to search for just alpha. Since alpha is a customer, we do want to accept the customer values, but we also want to return page order. That means everything defined under or associated with alpha. And in this case, we're using the webinar user. I didn't write that there, but it's the V. Posting this, we can see what it returns. Again, it returned the customer data, as well as all the items under it. This leads into my next example, which I minimized. Here it is. If we take this same example here, this production.search method, and apply it to a website and search alpha, we begin to see a similar item, just in more of an organized fashion. ID, class, and name. We can also search for beta. Sorry. Using the ID, we can get more information about an item as we showed in the document.get information. We can also open it in the Dialog viewer, as we'll show in the next example, or we can just display the thumbnails of the images. In this example, I've created where I highlight over the image. Oh, sorry, I need to pull this more into view. As I highlight over the images, you can see the thumbnail of the file it's creating. For educational purposes, I added the URL that the thumbnail is actually located at, and as we can see, it's all static except for the ID. Meaning once you have the ID of the file you're looking for, you can pretty much do anything you want with it. I should clarify that, not anything, but we can all understand that. Next we have let me see. Again, we can fully customize the site to display the information in whichever manner or organization is most efficient for your purposes. Next, we'll look at the lightweight client I was talking about, approval client. Often customers want to display a product catalog with regional content. In this case, we have Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3. Well, in this catalog, in Region 1, they all wanted to use just the alpha images. But in Region 2, they decided for their second page, they just want a beta and keep all the rest the same. And for Region 3, they wanted gamma instead of alpha on page 2. As you can see, you can use Dialog Viewer to send links or anything else to customers. And it'll open up with page 2 is correct. And of course, you can export this however you like. Next, we look at the second one to make sure that changes reflect. Region 2. And Region 2 is correct. And finally, we'll take a look at Region 3 with a black shirt. Sorry about that. And the changes are correct. Lastly, as this is an approval client, we'll notice that the only file that's not approved is the first one, whereas all the rest are. If we go back to the Dialog viewer, we can see that we can approve the file. I didn't set my resize. If I refresh, it'll work. And the file is now approved. If we go back over to the page, I didn't refresh. We can see that the file is now approved. Let's see where I was. Lastly, we have ES as a DAM system. Oops. With a custom front end. As we saw with the images in ES, here we organized them into a usable form. Basically, this displays all the images that are on the thing. This is a global search like we were looking at, just returning the page order information. Next, we can sort this information. For example, if we only wanted to show shirts, we only wanted to show polos, we only wanted to show pants, or even shorts. We can also sort this information further. For example, by brands. Alpha, all the alpha items. Beta, all the beta items. Or even gamma, all the gamma items. Lastly, we can sort by color. Black, gray, navy, and as Jude's favorite is, red. We can also make it more robust of a system and do things like search for it. Shorts, and it returns all shorts. We could search for red, and it'll return all the red information. And we can even search for a customer. As we can see, there's more to go in on a file per file name basis. For example, this file right here. If we click Show Only Alpha Items, it'll show only alpha items since we like that one. We can also get information about the actual customer pulled from ES database. In this example, it's a little ugly formatted, but this provides all the information about the alpha customer. His phone number, his billing zip code, shipping address, last modification user, and anything else you want. It's also, I believe it's also possible to pull even the logo if you like. Next, we can get information about the file. And to provide, let's go with the same one we saw earlier, the pants gray alpha, or I'm sorry, the pants black alpha. Get information about this file. This is the same metadata that we were looking at earlier. I'm sorry to drag that file. And as we can see, all this information is available outside of ES. Either the metadata can be updated through the standard ES methods, or it is also possible to update the metadata within the ES using the API front end. It is a two-way communication. The call response method goes both ways. Lastly, we can add to cart, add a couple items to the cart, and we can even check out with all the items in the cart and total price. In conclusion, we have covered a range of topics involving the API, including thumbnail searches, to a lightweight approval client, to ES as a DAM system. We can customize any of these examples to display the information in whichever manner or organization is most efficient for your purposes. This is only a fraction of what ES can do, the ES API can do. Anybody have any questions?
Well, Brian, I think it'd be good if you showed a little bit of the code behind how you built, this site here, basically how the login is handled through it, as well as maybe some of the code, just in your PHP code, to build this, how it would look to build it from ES. If you're right, if you can show that quickly.
I think it's going to confuse a little bit, but yeah, sure. For example, this website here. This is a lot of just the CSS. It's nothing important. Basically, the beauty comes in the Ajax post over here. This is what sends it to DALiM and gets the information back. This object right here, return, is what's encoded inside of that screen we were seeing a little bit ago. And you are allowed to parse that object any way you want. I don't really know how to explain any more detail here because, I mean, this is obviously people's eyes are glazing over and stuff like that. But the majority
we have a couple
of
developers on it, so just showing how the information that ES returns, which you showed, kind of the XML file as it returns, how you use that, just quickly. I mean, you have to go into great detail with it.
All right, the best way to show it would be over here, in this example.
Yeah, that's one.
All I'm doing is making a request over here and echoing it into a box. And I'm formatting however I like. From here, after it's in this field here, I'm just building it how I want. So if we look at the more complicated example, and we go to, say, click item, this right here queries every time you click an item, it queries all the results. For example, over here, let's say we click something. I can open up the Java, and we can go ahead and see what I just clicked. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And the request that I just made was production search, params, query shirt, substring search, true, and I eliminated all the other things. This is a JSON object. A JSON object can be formatted to however you want to parse that information, which I'm doing over here. If we navigate back, page order is what is returned from in the result, and I'm just navigating down the tree. Result, object list. So by selecting one, I'm eliminating this part of the object and the last part of the object and just including this. I'm defining it by result, object list, and I'm just calling the name of the file. Make sense?
Yeah. We have a question from somebody about how are image thumbnails delivered in the JSON data and returned
How are
from
image
ES?
thumbnails?
Is it a URL? I think
It's
you
just
kind
a
of touched on
URL.
it earlier, but you didn't show.
It's just a URL. When you actually, for example, I don't have the image thumbnail on file. Sorry, guys.
Misspelled that.
Sorry?
No, just let you know you misspelled that.
I know. Here's the URL, how it's defined. So the only thing you have to do is you would just include this in an image tag under source. for.blanchard.com. And the page order ID. Let's, for example, let's go ahead and grab this one over here.
So the best answer to the question is, if you get that ID for any file inside of ES, then you kind of have that URL, as Brennan mentioned earlier, that's kind of static, this public interface thumbnail. Then you just pass the ID into the last parameter, and you get your thumbnail. So it's real easy to kind of build it, and then just query for the parameter or the ID of the file.
Correct. Once you have an ID,
can you show quickly how you basically could do a search and pull back the ID for a file?
For the
if you could show that real quickly. Yeah, I guess it would be
more
that,
over here.
Yeah, I think you already showed it.
This would be that, and then you would go over to the document.get information. So if we, for example, if we wanted to go over here and we wanted a different document, well, we'd search for it. You know, you wanted pants blue gamma. You take this ID and you would run another query. For example, document.get. Just inject the ID you wanted, and it would list all the new information about that file. And again, this is sorted since it's a JSON object. You would just parse down using DOM.
Great. All right, great. All right, another question here on, they heard you mention Lucene index on how it's used. Could you explain that a little bit?
That's actually an Apache supplied thing. It's an interstranded method of searching and indexing text. It's actually open sourced. I mean, I guess you could technically be open source information retrieval software library.
Okay. And it's kind of the heart of the indexing inside of ES is Lucene indexing.
Right. Anything with like full text indexing and searching is great, especially like the web and search engines and stuff like that is where it's mostly used.
All right. We have a question on authentication. Can other users be used, or can you use like LDAP or something for authentication?
Let's break that up into two parts. Other users can be used. For the ES to talk, from ES API to talk to ES, you have to have an ES account. For example, if all this string is right here is just a base, if the developers are out there, in PHP code, it would just be a base 64 with your username, :password. And that's what's actually injected into this string here, as the string here. So in this case, it was just the admin password and the name, whereas in this case, it was, in the bottom case, it was webinar and the webinar password. All the permissions from inside of ES lock down this user as well. As for the LDAP question, ES has to authenticate. ES API has to authenticate with ES itself. If you wanted to do an LDAP search, if you wanted to use LDAP, I would recommend build that into a web page login and have a user authenticate it before they access in the API, as the API calls themselves must be authenticated against an ES server.
And I should clarify something as well, that ES in its API is using the authentication from inside of ES, whether you're tied to LDAP or anything else, but it's using the users that exist in ES and ES recognizes. Dialog engine, from the SDK standpoint, you can build any kind of user structure you want. So your front end, if you're not using ES for it, can have any kind of user authentication you want. Dialog Engine doesn't care about the user authentication, except that it will use the information for things like who created annotations, who has rights to approval, things like that. It doesn't, at its core, have any kind of user database or users associated with it itself, which is different than those of you who are used to the original Dialog product that did have a user server, and you had to be able to authenticate within Dialog. Dialog Engine is completely different than that. It's just an engine that serves up images and the interface for annotating, approving, rejecting, those kind of functions.
Right. In this case, when you log into the Dialog viewer, in this case, it's actually using the same login you did for the API.
Right. It's using it from ES's user database itself, but nothing to do with itself with Dialog Engine.
Correct. I forgot to show this part. For example, if on my screen, if I clicked one of the items, it would open Dialog Viewer. Well, if I went ahead and cleared all my cache and refreshed the browser, it asks me to log in. Here's where you can always encode this in the background, or, I use my webinar user. That's how we get access to it. So for example, if I used a different user that didn't have access to the approval cycle, I couldn't approve the file, as is the case inside of ES itself.
Right. And then he's just doing a simple difference in how he calls Dialog Engine, whether he pulls up the HTML5 version or the Java version.
Correct.
And
any other questions?
I think that's all the questions we had. Anything else you wanted to go over real quick, Brian?
I mean, if the
Not, I'll
developers
take
have
back
any,
the presenter.
nothing else I can think of, sir.
All right, great. And I'm going to take back over the presenter role. Okay, so that covered it. Hopefully, just give you a little bit of taste of what can actually be accomplished using the ES and Dialog Engine APIs. Really extends out the power of what ES is, and you have it, serving up images and metadata to an e-commerce site. It's, pretty powerful what you can actually accomplish with it while you still have your production ES system handling your approvals and doing what ES has been known to do for all these years. So we thank everybody for joining us on the webinar. Again, we try to do these second Wednesday of each month unless there's a conflict, a major conflict on that. You can go to our website at www.blanchardsystems.com/events to see kind of a list of when we do have the webinar plan in case it's been moved. As soon as we come up with topics for the next webinar, we'll post those on the events page as well and send in an email out that covers what we're going to have. If you have any ideas or anything you'd like to see us cover in one of our upcoming webinars, feel free to email us at text@blanchard.com. We'll be happy to include that into our schedule. If we find it useful, something that people would like quickly, we can move things around, move it up, and do it as quick as possible if it's pertinent. We try to kind of mix these up, go between ES and Twist month to month. So, in schedule, this one's kind of out of the mix a little bit since it was kind of ES API. So I'm not sure yet on whether we will do Twist or ES next month. We'll sit down as a group here and discuss possible topics, and we'll get that out to everybody as soon as possible. So again, Brennan, you had something to say?
Yes, I was wanting to gauge some interest in bulk import of like over 1,000 to 10,000 files and all their metadata. I was thinking of discussing that and how to import it into the ES using ES API. I wanted to see if anybody was interested.
And so if anybody's interested in that kind of information, feel free to give us an email. Email us at text@blanchard.com and let us know. And it's something that Brennan could include in something, or even do a little something on the side if we don't think it'd cover a whole session. So again, thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a great end of the week, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks a lot.